Hey everybody, back online. David Bay and Bob Chick with the last rep. And David, what a weekend it was at the 2017 Olympia in Las Vegas, Nevada.
That it was. It was a great weekend. Bodybuilding was exciting this year. I think the fans really liked it. We had some old champions, some new champions, mostly old champions.
Yeah,
but no, it was a ton of fun. So I wasn't sure earlier on in the year whether I'd be out in Vegas for the Olympia, and being there and being involved as much as I was, I had a great time.
Well, yeah, a good time was had by all. The attendance was great.
There's probably a few who would argue that.
Yeah, well, not for everybody, but we'll get more into that as it goes. Most importantly, obviously, everybody has seen the announcement put out by the various sources, most notably Jim Mannion, of course, and the IFBB Amateur League. And, we're going to break all this down and explain to it in a very special edition that we're going to put out.
We have a whole show just dedicated.
Yeah. It's very convoluted. It's very confusing for those who haven't been around. You have to literally been around as long as I have in this game to know how exactly it works, how it's broken down. You need some time. But like I say, you know what? We will take that time. We will explain to people what it means. You put a post up on Facebook just the other day detailing it, which is very well done, by the way. It kind of, it's a little confusing, like I say, unless you could really figure it out. And I'm sure there's some ambiguous language there for legality reasons and other things. So, like I say, I thought you broke it down pretty good for, regular people to figure that out. Like I say, we're not going to get into that now. We'll put a special edition. Right now, we're going to focus on the Olympia results. And it was, of course, the headline. It was Phil Heath winning his record-setting 7th in a row, which obviously ties the great Arnold, and really puts him in some elite company.
Yeah, I tell you what, I had the privilege of being backstage this year, and when those guys were backstage pumping up, I mean, no disrespect to any of the other competitors, but we've always talked about Phil being Phil's only real competition, and when I saw Phil pumping up backstage, I knew it was over. In fact, I had to run out for a minute from backstage. Dorian was sitting next to my girlfriend. Chad Nichols was sitting on the other side, and I'd stopped and talked to both of them and said, hey, I just saw Phil backstage, and I said, I think it's over. And Chad Nichols was like, oh, did you see Bonac? I'm like, yeah, he looks phenomenal. I said, but I saw Phil pumping up, and you could just tell. It was very reminiscent of 2013, where he essentially kind of just walked out, and you knew he was going to win. And for as much as I thought Phil had it hands down, I am totally open and respect people's opinions that had Ramy winning. But I think a lot of people were of the opinion that Phil really was at his best or very close to his best, and really locked down this win, which was nice to see. I mean, Phil needed a solid win, and on bodybuilding needed, just as a whole, it's just when you have maybe he could have won, maybe this, and obviously you still have people talking about Ramy winning, but I think the Olympia needed a set champion, and Phil brought that this year.
Well, and let me point out the differences to some people. You can win convincingly, and it can still be close.
Absolutely, and that's what I said to people.
Not only by the points, but I mean, listen, there's different things that occur. Has the gap closed significantly? Yes, it has. I'll be the first to tell that, and I love Phil. I think he's a great champ. I think he has dominated, pretty cleanly throughout all these years. Was number 7 the closest it's been? Possibly. I mean, obviously Kai Green's not in there, and we had some epic battles there with those two, but he's not in the mix now. Big Ramy has come into his own. You can see this coming. The guy needed some maturity. He needed some time in the gym. He's gotten that now. He's got more control over his poses. He wasn't fading out nearly as bad as he has in the past. So Big Ramy is a force, and he's different, as you and I have talked about for the last few years now. He presents a different package, and that can be a problem for Phil down the road, but he still needs another year. Listen, next year might be it. I mean, that gap is so close now that it fills off just a little bit. I mean, Ramy could easily assume that role.
And that's what I had said to people. I said, had Phil shown up this year, all things being equal as far as the rest of the competitors, had Phil shown up this year looking the way he did in 14, 15, or 16, I think we would have seen him in 3rd place. I think the way Phil looks last year, I think the way Phil looks in 2015, I think both Ramy and William Bonac could have been ahead of Phil.
Yeah.
But Phil didn't show up this year the way he did last year. Phil showed up at his best in a long time. And you're absolutely right. Just because I'm saying that I thought Phil won clearly doesn't mean that it wasn't very close. No disrespect. I mean, Ramy looked absolutely incredible, and those guys went pose for pose. I think where Phil edges out Ramy, obviously it's not in the size department. I really think, and I was trying to explain to some people, that I think it's the separation.
Yeah.
And that Phil is obviously not as big as Ramy, but Phil's got a lot of muscle, especially up top. Phil has very deep separation in between each muscle group. So when Phil gets in really good condition, and we've talked about this before about numerous bodybuilders, there's a difference between being in incredible condition and having deep separation.
Correct.
Some guys you'll see with just crazy vascular legs and they're peeled to the bone and there's just no body fat. That's that cellophane skin. But they don't have separation in between each heads of the muscles, in the quads and the back. And Phil has the separation. That's why we talk that's why we use the term 3D with Phil, because he has such deep separation. So when you combine that with him being in top condition, he's the best bodybuilder out on that stage. But again, saying that Phil won clearly and is not to say that it wasn't very, very close.
Yeah.
Ramy, he looked phenomenal. Like you said, he's really coming into his own.
Now, despite Phil winning number 7, equaling Arnold, putting himself in history, of course, it's not without his detractors who were quick to point out, what about the gut? What about the gut? Man, he had a beer belly out there.
Somebody just posted a picture online. It was a picture of Dexter with a distended stomach, Dorian with a distended stomach, Shawn Rhoden with a distended stomach, Phil with a distended stomach, and Ronnie with a distended stomach. There was a thread last year that showed Rich Gaspari from the 90s with a distended stomach. I've seen pictures of Lee Labrada with a distended stomach. If you look hard enough and you pause enough YouTube videos at just the right spot, you're going to find people with a distended stomach. Now, look, I am not going to sit here and make the argument that Phil's waist was as tight as it was in 2011. It is not, okay? Yeah. Phil in 2011, which some people think is just the best version of Phil, even though it's not the biggest, his waist was smaller. But Phil is a bigger individual now, significantly, so yes, his waist is bigger. But if we're going to get nitpicky and talk about the whole gut thing, it's like, guess what, guys? If you've got enough video footage of guys from any era, you'll be able to find inside footage. That's the one thing we forget. You see all these classical pictures. Yeah. Guess what? They didn't have camera guys swooping around the side of the stage and catching them from a back angle in their rear double bicep. Everybody wants to post that rear double bicep shot of when we've seen them of all bodybuilders. It's like, guess what? They didn't have that angle, or they didn't take pictures like that in the 70s and 80s. But I guarantee you, if you had footage and pictures of all these guys from the 70s and 80s that was the equivalent of what you had today, you could probably find some not-so-flattering pictures.
I found them of Reg Park. I found them, there was a thread on MD a couple years back where the guys were coming up with that same garbage. And of course, they take everything you say out of context. So I had made a comment on there that, look, same thing, what you just said, I actually said. Look, you can find a gut on anybody, Zane, anybody, pick it. Oh, you're out of your mind. So I actually found a picture online of those guys from the back, and clearly you can see that, listen, these guys aren't holding their stomachs in from behind, but nobody was stupid enough.
There was never previously a need to until you get guys on the side of this. And look, this is a bothersome thing for me. If you're a photographer and you're taking pictures from a side angle, you suck as a bodybuilding photographer. Yeah. You know what? Do your job as a photographer.
Listen, the differences are vast. Number one, years and years ago, all right, the photographers, and now you're talking real photography, not this click a button and 100 frames, rattle off where anybody can get a good shot, okay? Not to take away from the best photographers because there's still an art to it. But in the old days, like when the Chris Lunds of the world were out there taking pics, you only got paid for the good shots. Most of that stuff hit the cutting room floor. You never saw it again. But the idea behind Joe Weider and all the muscle mags back then was to glorify and make the bodybuilders look as great as possible. They simply didn't publish those pictures if it made a bodybuilder look bad, or you caught them in transition, or you caught them taking a breath. You can do that with anybody that's ever competed. Absolutely. They just didn't do it back then.
And Peter's told me the exact same thing. Peter McGuff said, we used to have bad pictures of athletes all the time
Sure.
for Flex magazine. We just didn't post them. So having unflattering pictures of bodybuilders is nothing new. They simply weren't posted.
Correct.
And really, if you think about it, prior to social media and everybody being able to post their own pictures in an online format,
Right.
you never would see those. If you take away the bodybuilding forums and you take away social media, we'd still be in an era where people never saw those pictures. And
True.
so, no, I mean, look, Phil looked phenomenal. He's catching his breath in between a couple of transitions for poses. Yeah, you're going to get some unflattering pictures. Should Phil be a little bit more conscious of keeping that tight? Sure, they all should be. But when you're going through a couple rounds of prejudging and you start breathing heavy, sometimes it's going to happen. So we actually, funny story, we'll share some backstage stuff. Bob and I were walking out of the back tunnel on Friday night, and some random guy he pulls up this picture of Phil with his stomach hanging out. It's circled in a bright yellow. He goes, what do you guys think of this? What do you guys think of this? I said, I think you literally took the worst picture of Phil from the entire night and put a yellow circle around it. I said, I think you're part of the problem and that you're an idiot and that you should get out of my face. And the kid was, I mean, normally, you know me, man. I'm pretty nice with people. But the prejudging literally got done, and this kid already had a picture with Phil's stomach like circled, and he walked like right up to us and put the phone in our face. Yeah. And I was like, "What are you doing?" Like,
now listen, you killed that kid, which was funny, but he, you know what? In all honesty, he deserved it. Listen, the kid had an agenda for whatever reason. Again, but that's today's people. These are the fans that we're dealing with for the most part, and it's kind of sad in a way because all they want to do is find a picture like that to. Listen, the bottom line is this, all right? It doesn't really matter. And you remember Jose catching shit last year for...
Yeah, the guy was on stage in an interview and was breathing in and breathing out.
He's holding the trophy in his arms. He's holding the trophy, getting interviewed by Arnold. Certainly not concerned about whether he's holding his abs in at the time. And he caught all kinds of flack. I mean, come on, man. I mean, that's just, Listen, let's keep to the good stuff, which is...
Yes.
Whether you love him, hate him, or anything in between, Phil Heath is a 7-time Olympian champion in a row.
And number seven was a good win for Phil.
It was a very good win.
Really good win.
Now the question obviously turns to the future. Listen, Phil is. I think when I talked to Phil before, I thought I remember him saying that if he got to 10, that he would be 40. So I'm guessing he's 37 right now, or going to be 37. He's got plenty of gas in the tank. He's got relatively no injuries of any major, thing. I'm sure he gets.
No, he doesn't. He's got, and this is another thing I don't want to ignore. He's got a very slight umbilical hernia, where his belly button essentially doesn't even look like a hernia. It just looks like an outie. And we all. And the funny thing is, anybody who's been really, really lean as bodybuilders, you really start finding out what your belly button looks like. When you start.
You know what? That's true.
They start getting ugly. But no, and and sometimes with it being as minor as it is with Phil, that might not even be something that you notice off season. So I would like to see Phil get that fixed because it is relatively minor and it would polish up his physique a little bit. But you're right, Phil has no glaring injuries. He doesn't look to have one side. Generally when we see guys getting older, the first thing you kind of notice is either the legs are down or one side starts getting a little smaller than the next. We saw that with Ronnie. We saw that with Jay. Phil's got 7 Olympia titles, and he does not appear to have any sort of injuries whatsoever.
Well, here's the thing now. Now, he wants to shoot for 10. He said that many years ago, especially when it started to become more relevant. I mean, listen, when you're winning 1, 2, and 3, 10's not relevant, okay? Now, when you're winning 5, 6, and 7 now, it's very relevant.
I don't know if he can hold off Ramy for another 3 years.
Here's where the challenge becomes, okay? Listen, anybody in any sport, if you can be number one in your chosen field for the better part of a decade, all right, you're doing pretty good. I don't care what sport it is. I don't care if it's badminton or if it's golf or if it's bodybuilding. Being the best in the world at what you do for 7 years in a row is quite an accomplishment and quite a feat. Now he's got 2 fights that he's fighting now. He's fighting Father Time, and he's fighting the competition, which has closed the gap. And we'll get into William Bonac in just a second. Speaking of closing the gap, he's fighting age now, and this becomes an issue with bodybuilders as they get closer to 40. The body does change, and just like you mentioned earlier, David, listen, there are significant differences in Phil's physique from 11 and 12, all right, to 16 and 17, all right, and it's notable. I mean, listen, he's also got a lot more muscle.
A lot.
These guys also carry a lot more muscle than the bodybuilders of yesterday, the golden era, whatever you guys want to call it. Listen, Phil is 30 pounds heavier than Arnold was. on stage. All right, that's pretty significant when you're under 6 feet tall and when you're Arnold at 6'2" or whatever he was in a physique. So yeah, you know what? Everything's going to be a little bit bigger. But he's got to fight. He's got to fight his own battle now with that. He's got to fight history in the making. And as you see, nobody's gotten past 8. So this should be this next year will be really something.
Yeah, I mean, if he can win another one, then he ties. I mean, the pressure it doesn't get any less for Phil; it just increases. Can he tie Ronnie and Dorian, and then it becomes, or not Ronnie and Dorian, Ronnie and Lee rather, and then it would be, well, can he beat the record, and then can he hit that round number 10?
Right.
So he's got the next 3 years for him are all milestones in their own right, and not just a milestone because you won winning another Olympia. Anytime you're winning the Olympia, it's a milestone, whether it's your second or whether it's your 10th. But Phil's he's got a rough road ahead of him. But a lot of people I think wrote Phil off after 14, 15, and 16 were a little bit. I don't want to say lackluster wins because you're still winning an Olympia title, but Phil wasn't as good as Phil could be, and he really came out and got it right this year, and got it right on Friday night.
That was notable.
Night. And maybe him and Hani got their formula reworked, kind of tried something a little bit different. We know Phil was bigger and leaner this offseason than he's been pretty much his entire career, and maybe that's what he needed to do, was not pull back quite as much weight. And I don't know, whatever Hani and Phil did this year really worked, and whether he can win 10, that's hard to say, but I think he's going to be in a good spot next year if he can repeat what he did this year.
Well, absolutely. Listen, first of all, congratulations to Hani Rambod. Okay, he's been with Phil since he was a rank amateur. Shouldn't even say rank. He was never a rank amateur.
He was just amateur pro.
Yeah, he went from damn good amateur to obviously to first time pro, and then all the rest is history. Hani Rambod is absolutely tremendous, and he takes great pride that he's been working with Phil all these years, but it's the adjustments that he's made. You're right. Listen, if he comes in Friday off again like he has in the past, I'm not so sure he wins this Olympia.
No, he didn't. No, I tell you what, and for as much as, like I said, I think Phil, I'm certain that Phil was a winner. I'm also very certain, like I said, if Phil shows up on Friday looking how he did in 14, 15, or 16, Ramy is Mr. Olympia today, period.
Well, listen, I mean, it's a 2-day show, okay? We all know that. And Phil traditionally has come in off, but he's still obviously been very good, and he's so genetically gifted that it's been enough to carry him, and he does, and always has, shown up Saturday even better. He couldn't have lost that lead. That's when, again, going right back to the top of our show, it was that close that if he came in off on Friday, he would have been losing going into Saturday. And I'm not so sure even improving that much because you know what?
No.
Both those guys came in on Friday. Everybody was on Friday, at least from those guys. I mean, there's a bunch of other guys that were not on.
Yeah, there were some other guys that got better, but I mean, your top guys.
Yeah, they were all on Friday, and it was a hell of a prejudging. Ramy, we've talked about the improvements he's made. Not so much in size; he's still as big as he's ever been, but the refinement is a lot better. The posing is a lot better.
His presentation.
Yeah, his presentation. His waistline has not suffered not 1 inch. It's still small, especially for a big man.
Absolutely.
Where he loses to Phil is literally from the back. But nobody can stand next to Phil from the back, much like nobody can stand next to Ronnie from the back.
No, I mean, Phil's rear double bicep is really a lights-out pose for him. Ramy's rear lat spread is ridiculous, but the detail that Phil brings in his glutes and his hamstrings, even though Phil's rear lat spread isn't as good as Ramy's, his lower half from the back, and I mean, God, Phil was just razor sharp this year. I mean, it was impressive, and so for as good as Ramy was, but I tell you, like I said, I almost feel like when I'm like, man, Phil nailed it, and it was hands down, but it was Ramy still looked incredible, and like I said, I'm not 100% sure that Phil can hold Ramy off for the next years.
That's going to be the threat, and to me, and I go back to the first TLRs we did with Peter, and we were talking about this when Big Ramy first came in, and I made the statement: there's 2 people, and only 2 people, in my opinion, that can challenge Phil up until that 10th Olympia, and that's Big Ramy and Cedric McMillan. And Cedric, which we'll get into in a moment, and why that prophecy will probably not ever come true. But Big Ramy, you could see coming a mile away if you got a nose for bodybuilding. And he's fulfilled that prophecy now. And guess what? You're right. This guy ain't going away. He's still going to be Phil's biggest threat. But you got to tell you what, man, you got to take hats off. You got to take hats off. Thank you, David. To William Bonac.
I mean, this guy.
I tell you what, man.
What can you say?
Wow, I mean, listen. Last year he was tremendous, and I thought he honestly could have been a little bit even higher last year. This year, you couldn't deny this kid, man. A lot of people had him ahead of Ramy. I take that back.
He was
ahead of Big Ramy on the score sheets on Friday.
Yeah, so pretty much everybody that I talked to, and not like the people I talked to is gospel, but there was a handful of people that had Ramy winning after Friday and Phil in second. But I think pretty much everybody who had Phil winning also had Bonac in second.
Yeah.
And Bonac, I mean, you want to talk about an impressive competitor. He was 15th 3 years ago, then 8th, then 5th last year, now all the way up to 3rd place. Now, I don't know the history of the IFBB in the Olympia as well as you do, but that's pretty impressive. I think, if we look back, maybe Dexter from 99 to 2000 or 2000 to 2001, and Jay from 2000 to 2001. Ronnie from 97 to 98. I mean, you're going to have a hard time finding a lot of guys that have leapfrogged in 1 year or over the course of a couple years from 15th to 3rd and done it in just very convincing fashion. And, Bonac is the thing with Bonac is he's also battling the fact that he just doesn't have as big as a frame as Phil or Ramy. Right. So when you see him come out carrying the kind of muscle he has on his frame with the detail, Chad Nichols had posted a picture of William today on his Instagram, and it is easily the best quad ham split in the entire show. It's like reminiscent of the old King Kamali stuff where there's just it looks more like a horse leg than it does a human leg with just that. And I mean, it was just and the thing about Bonac is, I don't beat the dead horse, but he's such a fun guy to be around. He's always smiling. I made the joke last year that the only person that didn't win that was happy was William Bonac. And
you're right.
Once again this year, William came off stage. I was just behind the curtain. He came back there. He was all smiles, little fist bump. I mean, that guy was on cloud nine, and rightfully so. Not just because he placed high, but because he really deserved it.
And, on that note, David, you got to give full credit. The judges take a lot of flack, always. Doesn't matter who wins, doesn't matter who places where. You got to give him credit for giving Bonac that. Listen, Bonac is not a widely known name, and I mean now he's starting to catch on.
Yeah, he is now.
But even up until last year, this is not a guy that you heard his name. This is not a favorite. This wasn't a guy you were talking about going into the show. The judges gave him every opportunity and awarded him justly. And again, he was sitting in second place after Friday. So listen, they called it the way they saw it. You got to give it up for them for that. They take a lot of grief, but I tell you what. It takes a lot of guts to sit there and not, play favorites. And speaking of favorites, listen, you had a few other ones in there. You had Dexter, you had Rhoden. Dexter was Dexter.
Yeah, Dexter was.
Now listen, I mean, 48 years old, still out there. Are you seeing a couple of chinks in the armor? Yes, you are. You're just now starting to see the quads aren't as sweeping as they used to be, but they're still obviously very good. There's a couple small things that you're starting to see. Again, now we're nitpicking, but this is the Olympia. So Dexter falls, a couple of spots. I know he was probably disappointed with that, but how can you be disappointed, bro, when you're pushing 50 and you're still up there with the best in the world?
Yeah, we've seen Dexter bounce around that top 5, though, pretty considerably over the last handful of years. Yeah. I think a handful of years ago he was 5th place when you had Phil and Kai and Wolf and Rhoden, and then Dexter in 5th. I mean, so he's bounced around that top 5 spot, but he's never outside of that top 5 spot. At his age, it's incredible, and he's still. Despite the legs being down just a sliver, his body still looks very fresh. He, if you chopped his head off and didn't know who he was, I mean, you would never guess it was the age of somebody that's pushing 50, or the body of somebody who's pushing 50 years old. I mean, he's incredible, and he's another one of these guys where I think he could probably still be in the top 5 for another 2-3 years. And
listen,
he didn't. I think when Dexter's ready to hang it up, he'll let people know. So everybody always wants, oh, is Dexter going to be done? No, I think when Dexter decides he's going to be done, it'll probably be at the Olympia,
Yeah.
and he'll do a farewell to let his fans know. So if there was no farewell by Dexter, just assume he's going to be back.
Yeah, listen, this guy will go to 50. Maybe you talk about round numbers. I mean, that'd be a good one to finish off with. But
Right.
listen, here's the bottom line: he's still cashing checks, and
Yes.
like Dexter has said, in previous seminars that we used to do on the Sunday Leader seminar after the show, he's like, look, if somebody can point me into the direction of a job that can pay me as much as I get paid to be a professional bodybuilder, to go in and train for an hour a day and
Right.
do what I do, I'll take it. I'll retire tomorrow and I'll take it. So he's got a very good outlook on what he's doing, where he's going. And listen, I don't know if he's done. I mean, he took this year off, so to say, to prepare just for the Olympia. So he didn't have any other distractions. He didn't have other shows. So there's certainly a possibility we might see him bump into a couple of shots here and post-Olympia shows because, listen, there's paychecks to be had, and he's in the business of bodybuilding.
Yeah, no, Dexter's very much a business person, and with the way the Arnold was last year, not having any of the top 6 guys there, I wouldn't be surprised if we see Dexter at the Arnold again. I mean, he's very much a businessman, and with even though he's getting it older, and if you follow him on his Instagram, he did more cardio this year than he's ever done before. But he's not one of these guys where I think he needs a real long off season. He's not.
No.
He's not trying to make improvements. Some guys, I can't do the Arnold after the Olympia because there's not enough time for improvements. Look, Dexter doesn't need to make improvements. He just needs to show up like Dexter. So it's realistic he could take, a month or 2 off and then, start dieting again, in December and come back and win another Arnold and just add to his ridiculous.
This is interesting, David, but he took off this year in terms of competing. Okay, so he had the greatest off season he's ever had in terms of time, and he did that on purpose because he's never been in that position. So he got to his heaviest weight ever, which I believe was about 265, 70 pounds, somewhere in that range, which is pretty big for his size and his height.
Absolutely.
And here's the interesting part to me though. Did it elicit a better physique? Now the answer to me is no. However, the unknown that you don't know is if he did not do that, would he have come in off, from what you saw? Like did that give him the physique that we saw, or did it ultimately not really do anything? You don't really know,
Yeah, no, you'd have to. I mean, you could speculate that. I mean, it might be as simple as he just wanted. He loves Popeye's chicken. He always jokes about Popeye's chicken.
Popeye's chicken.
It could be he just wanted to eat more Popeye's chicken.
Yeah, he did.
But no, you make a point. Maybe the fact that he's able to continuously bring a physique that's competitive at that level is because of the fact that he is pushing things harder in the off season and trying to continuously make improvements at an age where you're just trying to hang on. So, but no, Dexter was phenomenal. 4th place, another top 5 finish. I think it was a really good spot for Dexter. And he's another one of these guys. Look, if he's in the top 5, his demeanor is pretty good backstage.
Now, as we move into the 5th place position, all right, I just want to say for all the viewers, I may not always be right, but I ain't never wrong, bro. Like this was, listen, I called this. I called it. I've been calling it for 2 years. Rhoden. Listen, I've always I respect Rhoden, okay? He's got a great physique, it's very nice. It's obviously high up in contention. I never had him 2nd place. It seems to be whatever call-outs up there, I seem to always have him in the last position of it. If there's 4 guys, I got him in 4th. If there's 5 guys, I got him in 5th. I just think there's other bodybuilders who are more complete. So, as you know, in some previous shows, I said, if somebody's going to fall out of that top, it's going to be Rhoden. And this was realized this year. Now, I don't think his physique was particularly. He did come in a little bit off on Friday.
Yeah,
He was a little bit better Saturday, but you know what, David? He wasn't that far off on Friday. No, I just think the competition has caught up and is better, and I think that he's gotten exposed now because he's been out there a few times. That listen, the upper body isn't there. You can't be missing that amount of body parts next to Phil Heath and Dexter Jackson and now Big Ramy and now Bonac. There's no way he could beat those 4 guys.
No, I mean, Shawn Rhoden's physique, I'm really impressed with Shawn, and you and I agree on almost everything. This is a little bit of a point of contention for us. I really like Shawn's physique, but his physique is such that he really doesn't have any room to be off. Phil can be off a little and still do very well. Ramy can be off a little and still be well. Dexter is rarely ever off, but we've seen him not quite Dexter-iff. Shawn Rhoden, when he's at 100%, is incredibly impressive. but he really doesn't have any room to be off, and he was off on Friday. I know Shawn tried playing the size game a little bit this year, and I don't think it played to his favor, because he's one of these guys where the kind of the signature thing he's known for is being big enough to hang with the top guys. Big enough. He's not going to be bigger than Ramy or bigger than Phil, but he's big enough to hang with the top guys. And make no mistake about it, he's a huge dude. We're talking about the best in the world.
Yeah, of course.
But he's big enough to hang when he's razor sharp. But as soon as he's not as sharp as he normally is, then all of a sudden you start, like you said, he gets exposed a little bit. But he was definitely better on Saturday. Now on Friday, you guys that were watching, he could have been as low as 8th place. I mean, we saw him get moved around with Asha, with Roelly, and with Brandon Curry quite a bit. So the judges were looking at placing Shawn Rhoden as low as 8th. We saw Asha in the middle of that second call out. We saw our first call out, and then we saw 4, and then they sent 3 back, and then so Dexter was in the middle, and then they sent Dexter away, and then like I said, there was a lot of flip flopping going on there. So after Friday, I was thinking, man, Rhoden could be 7th or 8th, but he really pulled it together. Came back on Saturday. I think he moved up a few spots. I actually didn't take a look at the scorecard.
He was behind Roelly Winklaar after round 1 after Friday. So he was 6th at best, and like you said, could have been 7th or 8th. I mean, he was off on Friday that's the consideration he got, and I thought it was justified. I mean, listen, if he earns it, he earns it. Such is life. But when you got that crew, including, and now you can include the name Roelly Winklaar because he was ahead of him on Friday. They all got the same things in common. They all got huge arms. They all very big in the back, and they've all got thickness from the side, the chest. Those are the 3 areas that he lacks. He doesn't compare with those guys. Listen, his thighs are phenomenal, and his abs obviously are phenomenal when he controls them, because he does tend to get a little sloppy. As they get posing, he tends to let that stomach go, even though he doesn't have a big waist at all. He's got a very small waist.
He's the perfect example of what we were speaking about before. By no means, Shawn Rhoden's got one of the tightest waists up there.
Yeah, right.
But Shawn I think he, I shouldn't say dominates, because Dexter's abdominal thigh shot is pretty incredible. But with Shawn's quad sweep and his tiny waist, his abdominal thigh shot is amazing. But we've seen him, especially last year. Last year he seemed really like he was really relaxing his stomach, and he did a better job with it this year. But yeah, I mean, he's still a top 5 finish. So for his structure and his muscularity and stuff, that was good for him. I thought Roelly was a little off last year too, or from last year. When Roelly walked out last year, I was really impressed. But 6th place is a good spot for Roelly. Yeah. I mean, if you look at the top 5 guys, Roelly would have to be just bone shredded to move up into that top 5. I mean, does he beat Dexter or Bonac? I mean, he would have to be.
He only missed 5th by 2 points, so it was still a close competition between him and
Roelly's always. I don't think I've ever seen Roelly not disappointed.
No, I know.
He's just a fierce competitor. As soon as you get him off the stage, he's a funny, really laid back guy. But he's a fierce competitor, and you can see in his face when he doesn't get the call-outs that he wants that he's a little frustrated, and such was the case. I mean, he was still in 6th place this year, but not being in the first call-out, you could see he was visibly upset. Last year, there was a first call-out of 6 guys, and he was in that call-out. So same placing, but he seemed a little bit less satisfied not being in the first call-out. But I thought it was a good finish for Roelly. Obviously, one of the freakiest bodybuilders you're going to see in any stage, period. Nathan Asha finishing in 7th. I was very impressed.
That was a great spot for Nathan. I tell you what a great future this kid has. And we've always, since he came on the scene, I've always put him in that same category as Josh Lenartowicz, Dallas, rest in peace. Kuklo, that whole new crew that's kind of coming up. And there's been the next generation, so to say. I tell you what, he's not missing a whole lot. He's got the high lats going. He's going to have to kind of really work on getting that lower development to really fill that out. And his posing needs some help. He tends to pose, I want to say too big. He's kind of almost too spread out, like the legs are wide, with that wide stance and all that.
Yeah,
he really needs to refine how he presents his physique, because I tell you what, this kid is part of the next generation. He's going to be one of your top 3 guys over the next 4 or 5 years.
Absolutely. I thought he looked phenomenal. He's had a long off season. His conditioning 7 or 8 weeks out was a little questionable. We saw some pictures of him, and it was like, but he's one of these guys that can get in shape real fast. He's young. Obviously was training out at Oxygen Gym, which, for some guys, just having zero distractions is exactly what they need. But speaking of Oxygen Gym, 8th place, Brandon Curry. Yeah. Wow. And ironically enough, 8th was the highest Brandon has ever finished.
That's right. Before. So despite the improvements, he ended up in the same spot.
Was that 2008 or 9? Or it was. It's been a while, and so to have him come back and finish in that spot, and it's like it gives me faith for guys like Lionel Bayecki, because for the last 3, 4, 5 years we've talked about Brandon, and we got so repetitive with the same analysis of him year in and year out. We go, great potential, he's missing it. Great potential, he's missing it. Are we ever going to see Brandon Curry get it together? Right. We saw Brandon Curry get it together, and he's top 10 at the Olympia. Here's a guy that we were seeing slip 5th, 6th, 7th place at much, much smaller shows. And here he is, 8th at the Olympia. And you know what? Arguably, he could have been as high as, 6th place, maybe even 5th.
I wouldn't have had him that high. I thought he was much improved. Unfortunately for Brandon, everybody else was much improved that was ahead of him. So he ends up in the same spot, but you got to give it to the kid for effort and for bringing that physique up. And listen, it was the Olympia, and you've got some new guys that have come up since the last time he was in 8th place. So, like I said, all in all, listen, it was a great, successful year for Brandon. He's reestablished himself, and if he can go forward from here, he can be a top 6 contender. Next year, I'd like to see him a little bit more throughout the year. I don't think he's got that kind of a physique, or he's in a position he can really afford to just be out, for indefinite amounts of time. So hopefully he's got a game plan moving forward. Clearly the Camel Crew has done Brendan very good in his physique and bringing it up. And like I say, 8th place, it ain't nothing to sneeze about when you're talking the top 10 guys in the world. No. So he did great. 9th place was Josh Lenartowicz. So Josh sneaks in the top 10, the king of the gym. Listen, you got to give it up for Josh. Given all he's been through with Dallas and all. The fact that he was able to get to the Olympia is a testament itself. The fact that he was able to still place in the top 10, listen, all due respect in the world to Big Josh.
Yeah, I think I would not be one bit surprised if in the next 3 years Josh Lenartowicz is in the first call-out. He's got a massive frame. He's still getting bigger. I saw some comparison pictures of him. It's funny when we look at some of these guys and we don't see them compared to themselves from year to year. Sometimes you forget just how much progress some of these guys are making. And we saw some 2016 to 2017 comparisons of Josh, and there was definitely some serious progress. Now, you take into consideration some of the things that he's dealt with, and I don't doubt for 2 seconds that within the next few years, we could see Josh Lenartowicz be in the first call out, a top 5 or 6 guy. He's got the frame for it. He presents his physique great. His conditioning could maybe be a hair better, but top 10 finish at the Olympia, placed ahead of guys like Cedric and Victor Martinez and some other really good bodybuilders. So I think Josh is really coming into his own. A younger guy as far as bodybuilding is concerned, and I definitely think Josh is one of those guys where we have not seen the best of him at the Olympia by far.
No, clearly he's one of the future superstars in the IFBB Pro League. And I did see a post from Josh. He's going to take some much needed time off. It's not even physically he's great. He says, "Look, I'm in fantastic shape. I feel great physically. Mentally, I need a break. Like I really need to just kind of take some time." He hasn't even had time to grieve. For Dallas, being that he had to stay in Olympia mode and kind of get the job done in his honor.
And you know what? And Josh didn't really put it out there publicly, and I try not to make too many personal conversations into public information. But he, it almost goes without saying. But from conversations I had with a few people, Josh had he had a very hard time. Sure. And when you're talking about the way that your state of mind and all that affects your physique when you're at his level, it can make a huge difference. And so I give all the credit in the world to Josh because, like I said, I know he had a really rough time, as anybody would, losing somebody that close to them, so close to an event like that. And so,
let's not mince words. He found him dead. It's not like he heard about there's a car accident or something happened, or he is the one who was there calling 911.
Yeah, you can't even fathom that. Look, that's one of those things where unless you're in that situation, I've never been in that situation. God willing, I'll never be in that situation. But unless you've been there, I don't think anybody can really comprehend what Josh had to go through. And so the fact that he showed up at the Olympia, still placed top 10, Josh is as much as a champion in my book as anybody you'll ever see.
Well, 10th place, rounding out the field, was Cedric McMillan. Ended at top 10. This was not supposed to be his spot.
No.
All indications, David, was that this guy was a contender. He was your Arnold champ, which usually makes you the number one contender, so to say. This was not the best Cedric McMillan we've seen. He wasn't anywhere near his Arnold conditioning. He did. Now, I talked to him at the Meet the Athletes, Meet the Olympians meeting, and listen, he said they pretty much went with the same game plan. He was coming in big, and it worked for him at the Arnold. And I thought that was actually a very good game plan because when he tends to string out, he's not a contender.
It's not as impressive.
No, it's not as impressive. He needs to be full. He's a big man. He's 6'2". He's 280 pounds, whatever he is. They just simply missed the mark. And listen, Cedric was a great sport. As you saw him on stage, he's very playful. He likes to clown around a lot with the guys and have some fun. This is a guy who clearly has life in perspective. And for anybody that's ever talked to him, you get a very good sense of where Cedric McMillan's coming from. Listen, will he ever achieve that promise that he showed when he first came out? Probably not. I think we've probably seen the best Cedric McMillan that we're going to see on stage, and he may equal that at some point because I don't think he's done yet by any stretch. No. But you know what? This guy, he takes things in stride, David. He keeps it in perspective, and he's still a top 10 bodybuilder in the world.
Absolutely. And, we discuss over and over people slipping and people not meeting their potential, and this person was off and that person was off. But he's still top 10 in the entire world at what he does. And you know what? Like I said, Brandon Curry just renewed my faith in all these guys who I've just said over and over, oh God, are we ever going to see him? And it's not. Look, Cedric is an Arnold Classic champion. He's a phenomenal bodybuilder. He was 7th last year. He slipped a few spots. So it's not like we've seen versions of Cedric that were just bad, where you're like, correct, Cedric's off again. It's just he's got so much potential that when you don't see him realizing that, it becomes a little bit frustrating. I still believe that Cedric could be Mr. Olympia if he was in the.
Got all the tools.
You take Cedric and you put him in the same conditioning as Phil had, and you've got a real interesting show. Yeah. But again, a top 10 finish. So all things considered, a really good finish for Cedric. A great guy, and like I said, top 10 in the world. Even if it's not where you want to be, it's still not too shabby.
Well, the rest of the crew, as it rounds out, I want to give a special acknowledgement to Johnny Jackson, who called it a career, and he had. I talked to him at FIBO, and at that point he told me, now this is again back in April, and he told me at that point that he was going to hang him up. That's his last year. He said, I have 2 wishes. I'm going to go in the Arnold coming up, whichever Arnold that was, Brazil or whatnot.
Brazil, yep.
And he says, I want to win an Arnold title, and I'd love to finish my career on the Olympia stage. And God bless Johnny. He was able to win that Arnold, and he was able to get on the Olympia stage and look respectable. And finish out his career with a standing ovation and center spot on the Olympia stage. If you're going to go out, he did it right.
No, absolutely. And, we see so many people, and regardless of what sport they're in, it's not very common that we see people go out on a really good note. We see football players kind of fade away. We see basketball players, their best years are behind them. And, look, Johnny was never going to be a contender for the Olympia title. He was always a really good bodybuilder. He's been there, 14 times or something ridiculous like that. So for him to have 2 wins, one of them being an Arnold, come back, qualify for the Olympia, and be able to go out, did he go out on top as in he won, he's a Super Bowl champion going out on top? No. But by all other measuring sticks, making it to the Mr. Olympia and having that be your last show, that's pretty damn good. So
now let me give you some backstory here, Dave. Now this is not a story that anybody knows, but you're going to know now, along with all of our listeners. We only posed the top 10 bodybuilders at night for the finals. Obviously, we've got a big show. We've got to move on. We can't pose everybody, and then usually the rest they come out in the lineup, and I'll introduce them, and they'll hit a pose, and they're off the stage. Well, because it was Johnny's last show, we wanted to send him off right and do the respectful thing, celebrating not obviously this show, but his entire career. I think he's had 12 Olympia appearances or some such number.
Yeah, that's crazy.
To Johnny's credit, he absolutely did not want to come out and do a routine because he didn't make the top 10, and he felt he didn't deserve it. And Robin Chang, the producer of the Olympia, actually had to convince Johnny to come out, to do his routine, and that we were going to do a special send-off for him. He absolutely refused. He wasn't going to do it because he felt like he didn't deserve it. Hey, I didn't make the top 10. It's fair and square. I didn't make it. I didn't make it. Luckily, Robin was able to convince him to do this, and along with Flex Wheeler, which we'll get into in a moment, and get his time and get his rightful spot. And listen, I think that's exactly how it should go. Listen, you've done enough, buddy. You've been around for years.
Yeah, that's kind of it. Look, if somebody did one Olympia, or it was their first Olympia, and then they said, "Hey, I'm retiring.
Yeah, it doesn't.
I made it to the Olympia. I'm retiring now." It's different. Look, Johnny's been just a mainstay in the IFBB scene for a number of years. He's been a great representative of the sport, a fan favorite, an all-around good guy, and he's been an elite athlete for a decade and a half. And so to allow him to go out on top in the fashion that they did, I think was a great move by Robin Chang in the Olympia. Obviously, the crowd loved it, and I'm glad he went on stage. I'm glad, it's for people who know Johnny and how much of a competitor he is, it doesn't really surprise you, but I'm glad things played out the way they did.
Yeah, as it should be, and that's speaking of
which,
before we get
just to clear up one thing before we get on to the 212, I've had a bunch of people ask me what happened with Victor. Victor Martinez, this is my understanding, that he thought because he wasn't in the top 10 and he didn't have to pose, that he also didn't have to return to the night show. So he didn't, which is why he was DQ'd. Victor Martinez didn't do anything wrong per se. There was just a major miscommunication as far as how the night show was going to play out. So, so that's, I've had people ask. I thought I'd put that out there.
And by IFBB Pro League rules, you have to complete the finals, because obviously it's part of your scoring in order to get a placing. So Jeff Beckham also did not make the finals. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, he didn't show back up either, which is why his name isn't on that list.
No, I didn't see him backstage.
I don't know why. I never got any word as to why, whether he didn't know he had to come back, or whatever.
Him and Victor were probably hanging out.
Yeah, maybe Victor could have been relaxing, but you never know. But listen, I love Victor. Hopefully he's got another Olympia or two in him, because it's great to see him back on stage. But we've got to move on. David, is obviously we got a lot to cover. The 212 was obviously, we all know, Flex Lewis winning number 6, putting himself into his own record books as he's carving his own way.
He's the only one to do that. So
the entire 212 was pretty much a repeat of last year, with the exception of Eduardo Correa was not in the show. But it was almost an identical repeat of last year, with Flex Lewis winning. I thought pretty solid. I don't think it was as close this year as it was last year with Ashkenani. I thought last year Ashkenani had a nod. You know what I mean? Where it's like, this guy could beat him. This year I thought it was pretty 1-2. So.
Yeah, Flex came out, and that the discussion we had before about Phil and the 3D look and the deep separation, it's the same thing with Flex Lewis. When we talk about guys who come in good shape, or guys who have deep separation, and a combination of the both is what it really takes to win at this level. Flex has both. So he was in very good shape, deep separation, incredibly impressive from the front, the side, especially the back.
Sure.
Ahmad's rear lat spread is pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
But Flex's rear double bicep, it's the same. It's like a Phil and
it's like Phil and Ramy. Yeah.
Yeah, Flex's rear double bicep is just next level. So I think it was a good win for Flex. Another solid place for your 212 Arnold Classic. Ahmad Ashkanini, Jose Raymond came in, got third place again. He looked phenomenal.
Yeah, I thought it might have been the best Jose I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, Jose Raymond to me looked absolutely incredible. He sent me a couple pictures leading into the show. I talked to Jose relatively frequently, and just it's incredible. This guy, you see him off season, and he doesn't get out of shape, but you'll see him 8 weeks out and be like, I don't really know. And then all of a sudden 6 weeks out, and then 4 weeks out, and then 2. And the progress he makes from week to week to week in preparation for this Olympia is absolutely incredible. And he came out and just nailed it. And his conditioning was solid. His leg that he had surgery on looked really good. Maybe just a hair of a discrepancy between the 2 legs. Another guy, just from every angle, was really impressive. The bearded lady, man, he came out just as freaky as could be.
According to the score sheets, David, he actually beat Ashkenani on Saturday night.
Look, everybody's talking about, Ahmad, and Flex. It's like, no, there's a battle there between Jose and Ahmad, and
at the end of the day, it was only a 4-point difference in between second and third, so it was a very close competition. Where Ahmad ends up on top is he had a 5-point lead after the prejudging. So clearly Ahmad was better on Friday than Saturday, or Jose was much better on Saturday than Friday. But either way, that was very close competition, and great to see Jose. Jose's been around a long time, man.
Yeah, and he's one of these guys that he just keeps bringing it year in and year out. And he's another one of these guys where, obviously he's not old as Dexter, but he's just, he had an actual leg injury. So it's not just say he's old. I mean, he actually had a leg injury. And when you're a little older, the injuries don't bounce back as much as they do, obviously. And for him to look the way he did and have his legs be relatively even considering his injury was really impressive to me. And his conditioning is what it always was. I was very impressed with Jose. I was happy to see him get third place again. Yeah. I know Jose enters every show with the mindset that he can win. Now, is anybody going to make a solid argument for Jose beating Flex Lewis? Probably not. But I mean, for him to come in and place third, looking the way he did, was phenomenal. So
David Henry in fourth. David's always in the mix. Again, another tremendous physique. This was
seemed like another flip flop though from Friday to Saturday, because the way we saw call outs,
he scored better on Saturday as well.
Yeah, it looked like Derek Lunsford was in position to be fourth place after Friday. But yeah, David Henry came back in a big way on Saturday night, moved up into that fourth place spot. Derek Lunsford in fifth place. I mean, this kid is
unbelievable.
He's something special, and I'm gonna touch back to the separation thing, because this is what Derek does have. Derek, when you look at his physique, he's not shredded or grainy or dry like a Flex Lewis or a Jose or a Phil Heath. He still has striated glutes. Derek has incredible muscle separation, and if Derek has a little bit of time to mature and he can stay injury free and really nail that conditioning, and he looks like he's in good shape, but when you see him up close, Derek isn't like grainy shredded. Right. He's got incredible genetics. He is in good shape, don't get me wrong, the kid's in good shape. But if and when Derek shows up in the same type of conditioning that a Flex or an Ahmad or a Jose or a David does, he's going to be pushing for that top spot.
Well, I'll give you the shot right now, okay? Derek Lunsford is your next 212 Mr. Olympia after Flex Lewis hangs him up. Okay?
I won't argue for a half second.
And let me tell you, people, I'll get some crap for that, which is fine. Listen, I'll stick by it.
Not from anybody with a functioning brain.
No, but you know what? The kid's that tremendous. He's that good, and he's got those genetics that, like I say, this kid, he will leapfrog all of them and leave some of the veterans hanging still. And,
the other thing we got to remember about Derek, he was competing as a welterweight 2 years ago, people. Right. 2 years ago, the 2015 Junior Nationals, he won the welterweight. 2016, he won as a middleweight, bumped up to light heavy for the USA's, finished second, won his pro card. 6 weeks after winning his pro card, he's competing in the Olympia. So
you know who the last guy is? You know who the last guy is to have done that, by the way?
Lavroni? Wheeler?
No, Lavroni was always a big boy. He was always in the heavyweight. Dexter Jackson.
Well, I mean, this as far as like the turning pro and going into the Olympia.
I mean, but just moving up the class. Dexter Jackson comes to mind.
Dexter
started as a bantamweight.
Yeah, he moved up bantam.
Yeah, and moved up and won. But
turned pro as a light heavyweight at the North Americans.
Yeah, I mean, that, like I say, if you look at their careers, a very similar start to Derek Lunsford. By the way, congratulations to Derek Lunsford on winning the IFBB Achievement Award for Rookie of the Year. This was about the easiest decision of all decisions.
The easiest decision.
Yeah. Of all time.
And the second best dressed at the
second
victory
best
game.
dressed, yes.
That's the bout.
He did. The kid did good, man. I got to give him credit for that. But that's your top five. Obviously, there was a lot of good guys in here. You had Ronnie Rockel, Milan Shadik from the Czech Republic ended up in 6th. Namun Cho, the Koreans were representing in this. Sean Clarita, ends up in the top 10, 9th position. Ricardo Correa, 10th position in his first Olympia. The Tank Charles Dixon, I got to give a shout out for my boy. Listen, all these guys look great. The difference is with these guys is that top 5 is so tremendous, are so gifted and talented that it's hard to break in, man. It really is.
I ran into Charles on Saturday, and like a lot of people, I was hoping to get a little bit higher, and he's like,
sure.
It was funny because if you get a chance to talk to him, he's such a good cat. He's like, man, I wanted to place higher. He's like, I don't know how much longer I'm going to do this, man. And then he paused for a second. He goes, nah, I'm just kidding. I'm going to be back in the gym on Monday,
Listen,
and he's one of these guys, and I tell you what, look, I'm a competitor, obviously never anywhere close to these guys, and so I try to, maybe give them a little bit of insight from somebody who's outside of, their competition level and say, hey, look, man, you're still top 10 in the world, in the entire world at what you've chosen to do. Look at how many thousands of bodybuilders are in the NPC and the federations all over the world. And you're in the top 8 in the world. And he's like, yeah, when you put it, when you put it that way, it sounds a lot better. And I'm like, all right. But Charles, I think he looked phenomenal. I actually would have, to be honest with you, I would have had Charles probably ahead of Ronnie and Milan. Milan from the front, I'm very impressed with. He loses a lot of ground in his back shots.
Yeah.
Structurally, probably a little bit more aesthetic than Charles Dixon. And so with Charles, it kind of becomes an apples and oranges thing. He's literally as wide as not literally, but he's damn near as wide.
Pretty close, bro.
He's almost as wide as he is tall. And it's an incredibly impressive physique, is why they call him the Tank. But it really, with some of these guys, Sean Clarita, Milan Sadiq, Ricardo Correa, you start really getting into like this apples and oranges thing where the subjectivity of the sport goes all over the place. So you can make an argument, I think, for any of these guys. But at the end of the day, again, he's 8th place in the world. So hats off.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to skip to Classic Physique to round out this segment, Dave. We're going to actually split the Olympia in 2. So we're going to cover the other classes in our next segment, along with the changes in the IFBB Pro League and such. The Classic Physique Olympia. Listen, the bar has been raised so high in the last, just in 1 year since the inception of this class, that it's almost ridiculous.
It is.
These top guys brought it. Breon Ansley wins. Now, he was a name that was brought up as a serious contender. A lot of people could have had him last year.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It was well-deserved. Personally, I had my man Chris Bumstead, who I had that was my pick.
Bumstead was my favorite as well. And Breon is just put together so perfectly. I mean, the tie-ins, the muscle bellies, the aesthetics. I just think, when I think classic,
right,
I just think Bumstead has a more classic look.
Yeah,
but
I'm with you.
By no means. But you know what? By no means am I going to say that Breon Ansley isn't deserving of the win.
No, he deserved it. He deserved it fair and square.
Phenomenal. Yeah. And again, the interesting thing about Classic Physique, and we've discussed this before, is they put these height weight restrictions on this class to kind of tailor the division for a certain look. And even within your height and weight restrictions, we still have so many different kinds of physique. Bumstead's physique is significantly different of that of a Breon Ansley or a Danny Hester or even a Rosh Rabar. So in a division created to replicate a classic look, we still have all kinds of different types of physiques and aesthetics. And I tell you what, we talk about moving forward. There's a couple of really talented guys tailing off the bottom end of this year's Olympia, and a ton of talent coming out of the NPC this year as amateurs. We saw a kid win the North Americans that I forget. I'm terrible with his name, but his pictures were blasted all over. He could be at the Olympia last year or next year.
Sure.
And you get guys like Terrance Ruffin and the Rylan McDougal Batiste. I mean, some of these guys with a little bit of improvement.
Sure.
You don't know where this division's going to go, but the one thing you do know is that it's going up, and it's great for the fans. It's great for the division, and I was I was very skeptical of the height weight restrictions because I've seen, and not to get into the other international amateur thing, but if you've seen classic bodybuilding at the Arnold amateur level, okay, the international Arnold amateur. I was at the Arnold for a couple of years, saw the international classic bodybuilding they do. Very much what we were seeing is what we see at some of the lower level NPC shows, where the classic division there is essentially just small bodybuilders, just guys who are straight up and down. Hey, guess what? I fit the height and the weight class, so
right.
Now I'm going to call myself classic. And that was my initial concern, is that all you were going to get now was smaller versions of guys who couldn't be big enough to be bodybuilders. And I couldn't have been more wrong, and I'm happy for it because is that the right way to say I'm happy for it? I don't know.
No, not really, but go ahead.
Sometimes I make new things up. But no. It's an exciting division,
Sure.
and I'm still such a big fan, and I'll never apologize for that. So when I watch Classic Physique and I see guys like Breon and Bumstead and Terrance Ruffin and even Danny Hester at his age and Arash, Arash slipped spots, but man, he was really impressive. So this Classic Physique division is something special.
Well, that's for sure. There was a great talent pool here at this Olympia. I mean, it was so good that Danny Hester, the reigning champ, could only muster a 5th place finish. Now, Danny didn't come in off. Danny's never been off. I've known him for 25 years.
Danny's never been off in his entire life.
No. But the competition not only caught up but surpassed him. It was the same Danny Hester you saw. He was a very deserving champion last year. But listen, that's as good as he could muster, and all respect.
And Danny... Look, we talked to Danny afterwards. Danny's not done. Danny's not even close to being done.
No.
And Danny is very confident that he can get better. I think Danny realizes he has to maybe be a little bit bigger. And I don't think Danny's pushing the top of that weight limit. And Danny has always been of the mindset, over the past few years when we've talked to him, he likes his physique where he's been. And that's why he was very happy when Classic came out. And a reason why after earning his pro card, he didn't jump into the 212. He didn't want to have to blow up to be competitive in 212.
Sure.
But I don't think he is opposed to putting on maybe another 7 or 8 pounds of muscle to be a little bit more competitive in Classic. So Danny, we talked to him afterwards, and Danny's like, hey, I'm not done. He's like, I'm going to make improvements and come back next year and try to get my title back.
Yeah.
And he's got the structure and the aesthetics to do it. He's got to be a little bit bigger, but Danny looked phenomenal.
Yeah, listen, he's also 48, so you got
you wouldn't guess it by looking at the guy.
He's drinking. He's drinking from the same pool that Dexter is apparently.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the guy and you think he's probably 35, 36.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
We talked about Chris Bumstead. Like, this kid looks the part. He acts the part. He poses the part. He's got all the tools. To me, if you had to pick a flaw, he's got to bring the arms up a little bit, to match those tremendous thighs. And I tell you what, if he can do that, you're probably looking at your next classic champion, because I tell you what, this kid's got everything that it takes. He's well spoken. He's a good kid.
Very humble, yeah.
Very humble. He's Canadian, so expect nothing less. Of course.
Which we didn't see across the Classic Physique division, unfortunately.
Right, right. No, we didn't. Third place was George Peterson. George was also a guy that everybody talked about, pre-show. A tremendous physique. I thought he looked great. I just thought that the other guys were just a little bit better in terms of structure.
George. We talk about bodybuilding shows being won from the back, but in the Classic Physique, they're still hitting the back double bicep, and George's back is just incredible. I mean, he could hang with most of the 212 guys, if not all of them, in that back double bicep. And so I don't prefer his aesthetics. I'd like to see a little bit more sweep on his quads. I think there's a couple guys that I preferred. But again, even for Classic Physique being a division controlled by height and weight, you still have the apples to oranges regarding the types of physiques. George's upper body and his back is, I don't think anybody would argue that it's not better than Chris Bumstead's. Chris's legs are obviously better. Chris's overall flow is better. So George is really impressive. I agree with you. I maybe would have had a few other guys placing ahead of him, but I thought he looked really good, and it was a good placing for him, especially considering what he just won his pro card last year at Nationals.
Sure.
So.
Well, last year's runner-up, Arash Rabar, who a lot of people, I had him actually winning last year over Danny, given as tremendous as I thought Danny was. Arash is another guy like a Chris Bumstead. Looks handsome kid, well-spoken. He's really a good guy. I mean, he's a great representative of the Pro League and of the Olympia. He kind of blew it in the last day or two. I talked to him a little bit after the show. It's exactly what you and I had talked about prior to your show. Too much stuff going on at the end, too many balls in the air juggling, a little bit too much voodoo stuff at the end, and it cost him the show. And he realizes it, he knows it. He's going to take a step back from that next year or whatever his next show is. And this kid probably could have won the show, or at least been in serious contention for it, on Wednesday, Thursday, or any time before they actually took the stage. So it's a tough lesson to learn, but he gets it. And I tell you what, he made no excuses for it. He owned it. And I tell you what, do not ever count Arash Rabar out. This kid easily could be your next Olympia champion.
Yeah, in a sport where millimeters are miles, so many guys just want to really just be their absolute best, and we've seen it a million times across all divisions, making last-minute changes so you're 1% better and you end up being 25% worse. And, at the end of the day, if he was that far off his best and still placed fourth, that speaks volumes about how competitive he can be when he is on. So, again, to agree with you, he's got a great overall look. I think he'll be a good contender for a lot of years to come. But, like I said, the division is advancing. The guy I tell you what, the guy that I'm impressed with year in and year out, and I've talked about him no less than every time we talk about classic physique, was Terrance Ruffin.
Yeah.
And Terrance's physique, and I'll say it again, I think his physique is close to perfect, except he's working on a small frame. Now, I did talk to Terrance after the show. He asked me, what do you think? I'm like, I think, honestly, I don't know what kind of criticism I can give you because there really is none. I said, the only thing I'm going to ask you is how much room do you have to grow? He's like, I weighed in about 7 or 8 pounds under what I needed to be. I'm like, well, there's your answer.
There's your answer, yeah.
7 or 8 pounds, because he's like, well, should I change anything? Well, what do you think?
No,
and not like,
be a little thicker.
not like I'm going to tell Terrance he'll do this different. He's going to stray away from the game plan that's brought him to where he's at. But he was just looking for feedback, and that was the only thing. How much weight do you have to wiggle room? Well, probably 7 or 8 pounds. I said, okay, we'll be 7 or 8 pounds heavier. Yeah. And on his frame, 7 or 8 pounds of stage muscle is going to look like a ton. And I tell you what, he's, like I said, when you see pictures of this guy, he was down in, I think, Puerto Rico for a couple weeks before the show. He was doing some traveling. He had the opportunities to make some appearances. And for a classic physique guy, I don't think he could really turn them down. And he did a couple photo shoots down in Puerto Rico where, man, these pictures were just, the old classic kind of off to the side like this. And they were as impressive as any bodybuilding photos I've ever seen. And again, if you didn't have any prior knowledge as to him only being 5'5", 5'6", and weighing what he does, and you thought maybe here's a guy who's 5'10", you'd be thinking Mr. Olympia. So as we refer back to the division growing and changing, for as good as Terrance is, I think he's a guy who I think he can very well crack the top 5 next year.
Well, Terrance rounds out that impressive top 6. And David, I want to conclude our show this week with the feel-good moment of the weekend. We'd be remiss, David, if we didn't mention Flex Wheeler making his return to the Olympia stage. All eyes were on Flex. A lot of speculation. What's he going to look like? Is it going to be 1993 again? And all. Listen, it was absolutely not 1993 again. It was not the physique you were hoping to see on stage. It wasn't any of those things. It was a guy at 52 years old who looked tremendous for a 52-year-old guy, competing against kids literally half his age. Flex took this on as a personal challenge to overcome his adversities, to show that anybody can do it. It was his own personal challenge, and to get back on the Olympia stage one last time and all that. Listen, Flex should hold his head high. Obviously, he placed 15th, which I don't think surprised a lot of people. I don't think anybody had him any higher, kind of a Lavroni thing. But listen, he held himself as a champion. He got the respect of the fans. We got him out right, and we basically did the same thing with Flex that we did with Johnny and other past champs, where I had him come out center stage, to hit a pose in the center to a standing ovation of the crowd at the Orleans Arena, which was pretty cool and pretty emotional to watch. Flex is a very emotional guy. I've known him for many, many years. And, I brought him over to the microphone because I wanted him to say what he wanted to say. He had a very eloquent speech that was so well received by the audience, David, that it really just kind of put things in perspective as to what Flex Wheeler's all about.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Chris Bumstead was 2 years away from being born when Flex won the '93 Arnold Classic. Yeah. It's arguably his best. So not only was it competing against guys half his age, but significantly more than half his age. But no, Flex's demeanor from day one when he said he was going to go into the Olympia was vastly different than that of Kevin's. Flex said, I'm going to go in. I'm doing this for me. Right. The old Rocky Part 6 where he's like, I got a little something left in the basement. And he really just wanted to be at his best. And for his age, he looked phenomenal. He was at his best. I don't think there was any question that Robin Chang and the Olympia folks were going to let him get on stage and pose. The crowd absolutely loved him. And, he is an emotional guy. And I did a little bit of the interviewing for Flex Magazine and FlexOnline.com after the show. And I had the honor of interviewing Flex after coming off the Olympia stage, which for me, regardless of whether I consider it a personal or a professional thing, was an incredible honor. We had a little bro chat before the camera started rolling, and it was emotional. And when you've invested that much of your life into a sport, and you get a chance just one more time to get back on that stage and have the crowd on their feet for you, it had to be just an incredible feeling. And again, seeing the emotion come from Flex, it was very real, it was very raw, and you could tell that, he was where he belonged in that moment. And it was incredible. Wow. I mean, it's hard to articulate how, it was the same feeling when Kevin came out, and probably a little bit more special because, Kevin was gunning to be a contender. So for as cool as it was to see Kevin on stage, and that was amazing. Knowing that Flex's mindset was, you know what, I'm just doing this for me.
This was saying goodbye. You know what I mean? And it was done.
It really was. Maybe he competes again. I doubt it.
No, I don't think so. I think. Listen, you can't go out like that and then compete again. To me,
no, you can't. And like I said, it was very special for everybody there, for the judges, for the fans, for the other competitors. I had a chance to talk to some of these other competitors, a little bit on camera, a little bit off camera. I talked to Chris Bumstead, and I was like, man, is it weird? He's like, yeah. He's like, I want to walk up to half of the guys in my division and say, can I get a picture with you?
Yeah, right.
And no, I mean, Flex Wheeler at the Olympia. I mean, it's a moment where you get all these people that have been bodybuilding fans since they were young, right? Myself, people who started being fans when they were young, or older fans who maybe never had a chance to get to the Olympia before when it was moving from city to city and country to country. And the opportunity as a fan to see Flex Wheeler on a stage, if you never had before, is something that realistically, after he retired in 2002, you never thought you were going to have that opportunity. Never in a million years. Never in a million years I think I would be in the position I'm in. But even after I had the position I'm in, that I think I would have a chance to see Flex Wheeler on an Olympia stage. Yeah. It was phenomenal for everybody. And as big of a congratulations to Flex as I could ever possibly articulate.
Absolutely. Well, another great Olympia moment and memories in history being made every year, of course, at the Olympia. David, we're out of time for this segment. We will be back on a short turnaround, literally in 48 hours. We're going to push out another show because there's so much to cover. Yes. We're going to cover the rest of the divisions in the Olympia with a breakdown. And then more importantly, we've got obviously breaking news on a daily basis here. Of some huge changes in the bodybuilding world. These are literally history-making moves that are happening with the IFBB Pro League.
Don't stop your NPC contest prep. We'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah.
Don't go off your diet.
Yeah. All shows are on. Okay. So we'll be online over the next 2 days. Like I said, we're going to push out a show real quick for you guys. Appreciate everybody coming back after a little bit of layoff as I was overseas, and David, you were traveling as well. So that's going to wrap up another edition of The Last Rep. For David Bay, I'm Bob Chick. We're out.